Hey, this is Tommy Colletti. I'm here at the Music Zoo today. We actually opened in 1994, a long time ago. And not too long after that, probably late 90s, 1999 or so, we became Fender dealers and then Fender Custom Shop dealers right afterwards. Being on the journey with Fender and the Fender Custom Shop, we got to build one-of-a-kind guitars that you won't see anywhere else, runs of guitars that you won't see anywhere else, and set trends that have gone forward 25 years later that are still in the making today, that you play, whether you realize it or not, actually was spawned here. So I wanted to take you on that journey a little bit and join me in just exploring some of the things and the trials and tribulations we went through along that road. Probably before we start, it's worth giving note to Bill Schulz. And Bill Schulz, for those of you that don't know, took Fender over in 1985 and was CEO and president of Fender, I guess, from that point forward. Before that, Fender was owned by CBS Corporation, and you know, these big conglomerates get a hold of a company sometimes and they start like nickel and diming it and, you know, taking all of the good out of the company and all of the, you know, like we could use a screw that's 2 cents cheaper and it'll be better for the profit margin, and they kind of forget about like the guitars. And Bill Schulz, you know, took the company over, and he was a very inspirational guy. In the early 2000s, I got to meet him. I had flown to Scottsdale, Arizona to meet with everybody out there, and they pulled me into Bill's office, and it was kind of like meeting the Wizard of Oz, you know, at that moment. And I remember being kind of nervous to meet him. And in the 10 minutes that I spent in his office, I left floating on a cloud. He was inspirational. I couldn't wait to get back to New York to tell more of my customers about Fender and tell the guys that worked at the store about like what a great place this was, and how like we got to build more Fender Custom Shop guitars because this is so awesome, because, you know, like he had the spirit of Fender. If there's anybody, probably since Leo Fender and George Fullerton, that had that spirit, it was him. And he brought it back, and he ignited people like me, who's just a retailer who sells guitars and designs some guitars. And it gave us the ability to sell and offer guitars to our customers that they couldn't get unless they were rock stars. There was no way that you were going to get this custom guitar like exactly how you wanted it unless you were Eric Clapton or you were Jeff Beck or somebody like that, or Billy Gibbons. And now all of a sudden they gave my customer in Bayside, New York, Queens, that lived right down the street, the ability to design a guitar just like Billy Gibbons. And it was a wonderful moment for the custom shop, and that's why it's grown into this and blossomed into this thing that we know today. So then, going with this inspiration that Bill Schulz created for everyone, you know, in the 80s, customizing guitars became a thing, right? And I think that Fender realized that they had to offer this to their customer. And as opposed to someone just going out and just starting to modify a Stratocaster or a Telecaster, why not let the master builders at Fender do it for you and do it right and use the right woods and the right appointments? And then before you know it, it went from that level of detail into really starting to like look at the past and what happened in the past and why those guitars were so sought after, the vintage guitars, and how to recapture that. And I think that's what they did over a matter of probably 15 years, from the beginning of the custom shop all into the point where we became dealers, and then we took that and ran with it. So a lot of the inspiration through the years have actually kind of gotten us to this point right now with the guitars that you see around us that are all available for sale here, obviously, but they all spawned from 25 years ago. The inspiration that we got back then from Fender Custom Shop, from our customers, and just wanting to build a better mousetrap is what we started to do. And you know, the 80s was a point in time for the guitar that there was a lot of modifications and pickup modifications and people putting different tremolos on guitars, and there was just so much of that. I think there was a point in time where I think consumers and people, myself, we wanted Fender to do it. Let's get Fender to do it. The Fender Custom Shop with the right wood and the right technician doing it. And that's what built a lot of these guitars and started the idea of all of them. And oddly, the early days of us and selling these guitars, at first it started in Queens, New York, and then from there it went to the world because we were online. And my earliest recollections of us online, now you got to go back almost 25 years now, we had a dial-up modem. So we had a phone line, basically made a beeline directly to the internet, and our phone bill each month was astronomical because the computer was just online all the time. We were one of, if not one of the first dealers to actually post images of guitars that we were selling on a website. It was a novel thing back then. You have to go back in time, and I'm sure there's some of you that are watching this that remember, but when you went to eBay to look at eBay to buy a guitar, or you went to G-Base, or you went to a website, which was a specific thing and not many retailers had them back then. Most of those websites and G-Bases and eBays just had what I'd like to call grocery lists of guitars. You just read, 57 Strat reissue, maple neck, and that's, blonde. And you have to imagine what the guitar looked like. And we were here posting images. And it wasn't pretty back then either. The images were pretty, but the way that we went about it was kind of funny. We used a shop light to light the guitars, and when I say a shop light, the same exact light that you'd roll under your car and change your oil with is the light that we used for the images. The camera had a 3.5-inch floppy disk that we were able to get 6 or 7 images on, and then we'd have to run to the computer and stick it in the computer and download them, and that would take forever because the image would slowly just kind of truncate down until you saw the whole thing. And it was all pixelated, and we thought it was great. And so did everybody else, because before then you weren't seeing pictures, as a guitar shopping person, and we all did it, and how we did it back then before the internet was pretty much go from store to store, right? In New York, that was a big thing. You'd take a day with a group of friends and you'd go visit 48th Street and go to all the stores, or maybe if you were here on Long Island, there were a dozen stores on Long Island, and it would take you a day to get through all of the stores and see all of their inventory. And now all of a sudden you're on the internet looking in front of your computer at home doing the same thing. Or for most of our customers, I would say over the years, at work doing this from Monday through Friday instead of working and looking at images of guitars. But that's how it started for us. It was the shop light and the floppy disk. And it wasn't too long, as funny part about where this all ties into Fender. Fender back then would go like, I don't know how these guys are doing it. Like, they're posting images and videos on this thing called the internet. And of course, they would go and tell other dealers, and we were like, don't tell these people what to do. And we were, at that time, the younger guys, so like computers for us was fun, it was just like a good time. And I think some of the older guitar dealers and even bigger chain stores was like, oh, the computers and the internet, and how are we gonna do this with the guitars? And we were just having a ball doing this. It was just tons of fun. Those images back then, I think we had gotten some velvet from a fabric store, and we'd crush the velvet up and put the guitar on top of the velvet with the shop light. And that was a half a day trying to do that and just waiting for those images to load. I specifically remember the blue velvet. I think you have an image of it somewhere. We had blue velvet, we had orange velvet. We were trying to always keep in the Music Zoo theme of the colors. But that's how it started. And it grew, and the popularity of the custom shop and people wanting to see these guitars and being able to see them on our site led us to now all of these great creations that we have. So the early days of the custom shop, for us, part of it was, most of it, all of it was fun. But we were ordering guitars that we really wanted ourselves. Like, we were building guitars for ourselves because we were guitar players, and we are guitar players, and we love guitars. And we noticed little things like, like the tiny little frets on a vintage Strat. Not so easy to bend, but that a big chunky like jumbo fret much easier. The radius on a fingerboard, like the vintage radiuses were a little tougher to play, more modern music. And then, and as guitar dealers, you'd see these guitars, vintage guitars come in with these modifications and go, oh, even though it's not as the integrity has changed from like what its original vintage appointments were from the 50s, this is way more fun to play now. So we started taking that and building on that theme. And as we had those guitars in the store, then our customers would come in and go, oh, I never thought of that. Like, I could do that. Be like, yeah, you could do that. And you could do it in these 100 different DuPont finishes that like weren't available back in the day, but now that they are. Oh, you want a candy tangerine? Yes, you could have a candy tangerine. You want a Floyd Rose on that Strat? Absolutely. So it became like this thing like where some of it actually started out as almost blasphemy in like a laughing way. Like, you know what would be cool? Let's put a Floyd Rose on a no-caster, right? Like you're gonna do all your country licks with like your single coil, like no-caster pickup, and then do dive bombs on. It's blasphemy, right? And then, but it creates a new type of music. It takes like a country player to play that and go, oh, this is awesome. I never would have thought of that, you know? And it's inspired us to do things, and that led us to this road where we not only inspired our customers to do this, but it also gave them vision going like, oh, that can be done. So if they're doing this, then I should probably try this, you know? So it really, I feel like we were one of very few stores that really helped to tell the vision of what the custom shop could be, aside from the actual custom shop individuals, you know, like we were part of that army that was set out like with the inspiration from Bill Schulz to like really get the message across of what was possible and make every one of our customers rock stars, which is really what we did, including ourselves. I got guitars built for myself that unless I was famous, I would have never been able to get built. And that's what's so great about Fender Custom Shop. So what's a master builder to me? Early on, I had a unique perspective of this. We had a road show in Little Neck, Queens, which is the location of our first store, in the early 2000s.
Tommy, what's going on today?
You got me, Doug. I really don't know.
Fender event. Don't look at this.
Yeah, we're just flipping out, having a fender bender, you know.
And that road show in particular was Mike Eldred, Dennis Galuska, Mark Kendrick, Joe Reynoso, potentially Mike Kotzen, Rob Maywalt. There were several people there. And they spent a day and a half with us at the store and talking to customers and talking to us, and we might have even done some pictures or videos back then. I don't know if we were advanced enough to do videos at that point, but we was pretty close to it. And one of my biggest takeaways was the camaraderie between all of them. Dennis Galuska specifically and Kendrick were like this little comedy team, and the banter back and forth and the teasing each other and the constant digs and stuff like that was only something that you could have with people that like really have a history together and are so comfortable with each other that like anything goes and they could say anything because they're comfortable saying it and they don't worry about what that person's gonna think or anything. And you could feel it with Eldred, and you could feel it with Joe Reynoso and all those guys that like have, you know, if you're a fan of Fender Custom Shop and or the Master Builders, and maybe you're lucky enough to have been, whether you're here in the US or in Japan somewhere, have gone to one of these road shows and been around those guys, it really is kind of like a brotherhood and a team. And the passion is like, you could cut it with a knife. It's so there. And they take that, you could see that they take that passion and put it into what they do. And obviously they're all really happy at what they do, because if they weren't, they probably would have been pretty miserable at the store that day, but they weren't. They were having a good time, and it was clear that they had all kind of found their destiny somehow. And it was it was interesting to see because it felt so comfortable, and it really felt like that they were all like really comfortable in their own shoes and had found their calling. And I think that you don't see that every day. And that was a big takeaway for me. And they take that and they put it into your guitar, whether it's you or Eric Clapton. You're getting that same passion and that same attention to detail and the same, like, this is what I was meant to do into your guitar. And it's something that I took away with me, and that's been with me ever since. And I guess maybe the Music Zoo, and I'm one of their biggest customers because I'm all in and I believe in what they do. And the guitars speak for themselves. And obviously the people who play them tell the story just as well if it's not me. And you could go through the list of rock stars that have used master-built guitars over their vintage guitars to perform and record with over the years, and it tells the story just probably better than I am. So now joining me is Jordan Usatch of Music Zoo. You're a tenured employee at this point, right?
I hope
started when he was 9 years old.
Yeah.
Still here, and
Yeah.
he's here to talk about it, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's right. Well, talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're talking about relics.
That's right.
The most inflammatory topic in the guitar community. And
sure.
I think the relic thing is a really interesting feature of the guitar community and a thing that's here to stay. So why don't you tell me about the first time you ever saw a relic?
My introduction to a relic was actually at a NAMM show. And like many people, spectators at the NAMM show, Fender Custom Shop had in a glass case, I believe it was a Relic Stratocaster. I can't remember what finish. I want to say it was Sunburst. I could be wrong. And at first, and most people at the NAMM show were looking at it and go, wow, they have a vintage guitar on display. That's great. And then it took a little, like a little research to go oh, wow, they actually did that to the guitar.
Right.
And it was funny, the reaction in the booth at Fender while that was all happening, right? Now, NAMM is over a few days, and you just, usually you drift in and out of a booth for an hour, and then you're there. And then you're gone and somewhere else and stuff, but you're still hearing rumblings in the background of what people are talking about. And certainly the cool guitars people are talking about, and people were talking about that guitar. And some of it was great, and some of it was like, who the heck is gonna buy that? Like, who wants a scratch guitar?
What year was that?
Yeah, it was. I feel like it was late 90s, early 2000s.
It's 2023, and people are still yelling on the internet about relics.
Yeah.
And I think my answer to the relics thing is that people always say, when is this fad going to end? But it's been 25 years, 30 years almost.
Yeah.
The relic thing is not going away, and I think it gets cooler and cooler. I think it's just a unique take on what makes a Fender guitar a piece of art.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it started more like this. This happens to be...
Yeah, tell me about that one.
Yeah, this is a 99 Relic Strat. And back then, for the people in the know, this is when Vince Canetto was there, and I think Vince was doing a lot of the relicking. And he had a way, I'm sure there was more than one person, but he had a way of relicking the guitars. And this was like over the top. This was like, holy cow, I can't believe that somebody would do this to a guitar. And there's checking and there's some dings, but then you fast forward to that.
To this. This is a 2023 super heavy relic, color over color. I mean, this thing, and it's team built. So let's take a minute right now to shout out the team builders at the Fender Custom Shop, whose relic work is top notch, I think. I think the master builders have their own, each one has their own like personality to it, and I think they impart that knowledge onto the team builders. Because every time we get a team built in that looks like this, we're like, wow, everyone there is just firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, I agree.
Take a look at this. Like, let's look at the backs of these two from like, here's the finish checking, and they kind of look similar. I think on this one, it's a little more like it almost like looks like you were saying the other day, they put like a little bit of lacquer over it after they reliced it.
Correct.
But this one, they kind of use like the newer flash coat lacquer where it's just like
Yep.
a little
Agree.
touch.
Agree.
Really lets the wood
They
breathe.
they both have their thing, yeah.
Yeah.
But you could see that how the aging has taken on a life of its own. I still see all the sales emails that come in here at the Music Zoo every day.
And I see the YouTube comments.
And yeah, and I would say it's once a week or twice a week where somebody's like, "You guys are out of your mind to sell a scratched guitar like that. You have a lot of nerve, you know." And Fender, blah blah blah. You know, it's all craziness. And then the email after that is, "That's the greatest thing I've ever seen." And that's always been part of the retail thing too. I think more. It's funny how you see it on the internet as much as you saw it in the retail store. So like in the retail store, I literally could be working on the floor, waiting on people, helping people, and someone would come and grab a guitar and play it and go, put it back, and they'd leave, and then 15 minutes later, somebody would come in and go, whoa.
Yeah.
It was just, you know, like...
Right, and it's the same guitar, right?
It's the same guitar. It's the same
something
exact
for
guitar.
everyone.
You could never figure out there's something for everyone, for sure.
Yeah, and I think, speaking as a younger person, like I started at the Music Zoo in 2010, 11. I was like 9 years old.
A wee lad.
A wee lad. And I remember seeing an Ultimate Relic on the wall and going up to Tim or you or someone and being like, "Oh, what is this, like an old 64 Strat?" And you guys were like, "No, it's brand new. We just have the custom shop build them that way." And that was my first introduction to relics and starting to learn about the aging process and the almost improvements that it does to a guitar, letting the wood breathe.
Right.
The lack of a finish, letting the guitar like speak for itself.
Yeah.
Let you as a player do your thing on it.
Yeah, that's a conversation in itself, right? Like nitrocellulose or polyurethane finishes and how they change the tone of the guitar. And we had found as we started relicking the guitars more and more and removing more and more finish from the guitar, they just resonated more. There was just more life there. And it makes all the sense in the world, right? You're coating, especially a polyurethane finish, you're taking what basically is like the same material as a plastic bag and melting it on your guitar. And like, how could it not affect the sustain and the vibration of the guitar? So then you're talking like people love nitrocellulose, but there's a whole thing in the nitrocellulose too. A lot of the nitrocellulose guitars still have a poly sealer on them. So then it's just like, oh, well, you know, like, so there's so many layers of this. But as you pull away the finish, you know, you get more of that vibration. And the thing that's interesting is we don't want to take all the finish off.
No, I'm really still one. There's some right there.
We want some finish on.
Yeah. And I think to play devil's advocate too, for as far as like finish goes with the custom shop, you can see they often do like once a year, they do like the American Deluxe or something that has like a poly finish. I think even if you're a player that you want your guitar to be clean forever,
right,
you can order a historic Fender Custom Shop guitar with a poly finish, and
That's
that guitar
true.
will stay pristine.
Perfect. Yeah.
Like a Twinkie till the end of time.
Like a Twinkie till the end of time is absolutely true.
Yeah.
Part of the custom shop, what you want.
What
And
you want, yeah.
Yeah, different strokes for different folks.
All right, so moving on from relics to something else that's near and dear to the Music Zoo's hearts, roasted woods. I think you have a lot to say about roasted woods, don't you?
I do.
Go off.
So, so in 2005 or so, we started building a lot of guitars with Charvel. And at that point, we were trying to, my part of the vision was to kind of like recapture the vintage part of Charvel and like what was happening in the very early 80s with those original pre-pro guitars and early serialized guitars. And after that had started, at the same time, a guy by the name of Mike Kotzen was working at Charvel and Jackson, and he would constantly loft different ideas to me and different, maybe, you know, like I was looking for something, and he was like, "Hey, we have zebra wood. Okay, let's make some guitars out of zebra wood. Hey, we have, you know, walnut. How about that?" And we kept. One of the woods we used was butternut, which we affectionately called a Bella, I think at one point.
Oh yeah.
Weighed
nothing.
Yeah, weighed nothing. So we was constantly looking for something. Give me something different. You know, Charvel is the custom shop guitar company, right? It's the modified, like, you know, high performance guitar. Like, I'm looking for all this stuff. So he knew I was in that mindset. So fast forward to a NAMM show. I want to say it was 2006, and And he pulls me aside at the NAMM show and he goes, "Come here." And we go back into like the hallway at NAMM, like behind all of the displays and everything, like in like the secret location. And out of a duffel bag, he pulls this brown wood. And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Smell it."
Yeah.
And I smell it. And it kind of like
Sounds
had
way
like,
more illegal than it is.
it smelled kind of like a cross between bacon and like a campfire.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, I give. Like, what is it?"
Yeah.
He goes, "It's roasted. We have a wood vendor that we're getting, some of the other woods that you purchased for Charvels from us, that's roasting this wood. And so far, the furniture manufacturers are using it, and they find it really easy to mill. And it's really cool stuff, and it looks different than everything else. And I thought that you might be interested in building some Charvels with it." And that started the whole thing for me, right? So now I come back from NAMM and now like on the internet trying to find anything I can for roasted wood. And sadly, what I found tons of information about it, and I saved the links for the websites that had all the information about the roasted wood and companies that actually scientifically analyzed the wood and like under a microscope and really studied like its acoustic properties and things like that, and all of those websites are gone. So I have to go on memory of what I remembered, and what I remembered was
Right, I think I'll back you up too.
what I remember was the roasted wood was not only like changing the color of a wood, so a maple would become like a dark brown, right, like that, and that's not too dark.
This isn't
Like
too
some
dark,
of the
yeah.
early models that we had were
a light
really,
roast.
really,
Yeah.
it would be maple and it was dark like a chocolate bar.
Yeah,
But-
truly.
But also what it would do is it would kind of bake out the hemicellulose in the pores of the wood, right? So wood up in a microscope is porous. It's almost like your skin, right? And you cooking all of that oil or hemicellulose out of the wood then creates all these like open ferrules. And you could almost say that like by this happening, you're creating more like acoustic sonic properties. The early Charvels that we got were brighter and more resonant than electric guitars that I had heard
Right.
prior to that. And that just freaked me out, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And then as you study more and you look more into it, you're also kind of fast forwarding the aging process too,
Right.
with the roasting, right? Now, a lot of this stuff, like there might be some people watching this and going, "Of course I know this," but this is in 2005. This isn't 2000. We're doing this in 2023.
Yeah.
So a lot of time has gone by, and at that time, certainly even Mike and the Charvel people I don't think they studied it enough, other than just looking at it and going, "Hey, Tommy's looking for some more wood, like
Right.
this is cool."
Yeah.
So we built years of Charvels with those, and then I had gone to Joe Reynoso at Fender for the Custom Shop and said, "We want to do roasted Fender Custom Shop guitars, master build, team build, however you'd make them for us, we want them." Fantastic. So off to the races
Yeah.
we go, and we started making Strats and Teles with that roasted wood, right?
Yeah.
Necks, bodies, what have you. And I guess that was probably like 2012, 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't too long after that Joe called me and he goes, "I got to talk to you." I'm like, "Okay, what happened?" He
The
goes,
dreaded call.
yeah, the dreaded call. He was like, "It's too big, man." He goes, "I have dealers all over the world asking for roasted necks and
Right.
roasted bodies. They're seeing your website and they're freaking out and they're giving me a lot of heat. And I got to make a move. So order as many as you want, but this is coming.
Yeah.
For next year, we're going to put it in the price list.
Yeah.
I still love you. It's still okay, but
Yeah.
this is where it's
I
going."
think
And
it's
it
all
was-
it's all part of the game, I guess, right? But it's nice
Yeah.
to see that we were
Yeah.
ahead of the curve in 07 or 08 and
Yeah.
starting to use that to
Yeah.
our advantage of like
Yeah.
building.
And certainly
cool
through the years,
guitars.
I didn't discover roasted wood. I didn't claim to invent it on any guitars. It's been used for acoustic guitars, and you could sit here and we could talk about like Stradivarius violins and how old those wood was that he was working with back then,
Yeah, right.
and the lacquers, and we could talk forever on this stuff. But it was fascinating to me. It remains fascinating. It's obviously something that the rest of the guitar industry has picked up, from acoustic guitars to electric guitars. And every time somebody new would pick it up, I'd just be like, "Ah!" Like it just kind of like
Yeah.
because I knew it was too good to be true.
Right. To our own credit, though, like you put 2 and 2 together with like roasted woods and an ultimate relic. If I say ultimate relic roasted Dale Wilson or ultimate relic roasted Jason Smith Strat, we just sold 5. Like,
Yeah.
They don't stay in stock.
No.
So
Minutes, not even hours.
yeah. So it's always cool to see those guitars come
Yeah.
in, but they fly.
Yeah.
For good reason, because
Yeah.
the roasted wood adds just like another unique like characteristic to an already one-off guitar.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just a moment in time.
Yeah.
But like I'll take a victory lap and
Yeah.
and
I
enjoy it for what it was. You know.
don't get sick of them ever.
No, we still build them. It's not like
Yeah.
it ended or anything. And it's just, and I think that we still push the button more than just about anybody else, whether it's the ultimate relic guitars or the roasted guitars. But
Right.
it's something that was led into the wild for the rest of the guitar people.
For sure.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, Garrett here. I'm joined by my friend, collaborator, and boss, Mr. Tim Reynolds, to talk to you a little bit about the Fender Custom Shop runs we've done that are exclusive to the Music Zoo. So, Tim, could you explain a little bit for us how it was in the early days of the Fender Custom Shop before it became the structure that it is now? And this must have been the early 2000s, no?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, early 2000s, we were already an established Fender Custom Shop dealer. And back then, it was sort of like, they were trying to produce these benchmark guitars that they had done historically. You know, the 51 NoCaster, the 56 Strat, the 1960 Strat, the 63 Tele. And that was the main offering they had back then. And they had new old stock, Closet Classic, and Relic finish packages, and most folks back then would be content to get a historically accurate sunburst 56 Strat with a 7 1/4 radius and tiny frets and just
Single ply guard, all the little minutia.
Yeah, just chasing that real specific, vintage correct vibe. And I think that early on we had realized, we wanted to make these guitars more modern, but then we also sort of understood that there was things Fender had never done that we found exciting.
Right.
And that sort of was the beginning of this idea that we could sort of have our own model, our own run, and really just try to push the boundaries of what everyone else was doing at the time. So back then, 9.5-inch fingerboard radius, medium jumbo frets, reverse wound, reverse polarity, middle pickups. Those were the types of
Cutting
things,
edge
that
stuff.
were like crazy to do back then. But we wanted a playable guitar.
Right.
A 5-way switch from the factory.
Right.
They would always have a 5-way switch in the case, but you had to go and, install it
Or
yourself.
the Telecaster with the mud switch, right, for the early 50s models.
Exactly. So, at the beginning, we just started, trying to order some of those things from the factory.
Right. Very
I think
subtle changes.
Very subtle changes, yeah. And I think, the real first big run idea we had was the Music Zoo Ultimate Relic, right? And so if you go back, I know Tommy spoke about this earlier in the video. If you go back and you look at the late 90s and you had the Kineto stuff.
Right.
And again, they offered a Relic package in the early 2000s, but
From
it
the
was
factory.
from the factory. So, the hardware was aged subtly. There was some checking. There would be a ding here and there.
Right.
Every once in a while you'd see a little forearm wear or a little bit of wear on the neck.
Some primer showing through
Yeah,
occasionally.
And of course, it was very polarizing back then. There's a lot of folks who, oh, it's aged. What are
Right.
you doing? Or,
As
oh,
it
there's
is to this
too much
day.
forearm wear. But I think, as we were looking at things back then, we would see, the Stevie Ray Vaughan guitar or the Rory Gallagher guitar and be like, that's just so amazing, right? And I think we had caught wind, 2002, 2003. We knew they were embarking on the Stevie Ray Vaughan guitar, and we knew John Cruz was going to do it. And I think our idea was very succinctly, I want the most ultimate aged heavy Relic guitar you could possibly make.
Like most of the paint's gone.
Yeah, just take 80% of the paint off the guitar. The
Right.
back of the neck, the body, the fingerboard, wherever you want to take it
Yep.
from, but just go all the way.
Yeah.
And I know, when we spoke to the folks at Fender, they were,
Reticent.
yeah, they were like, what do you mean? We're like, just take all the paint off. And they're
like,
like,
why
but
would you want
why? Yeah. And it's funny because they're like selling us relics, but we're like, no, go all the way.
Yeah.
And they were actually very reluctant to do it. And they
Right.
were like, we understand why someone would want a copy of Stevie Ray's guitar. It's
Right.
Stevie Ray. But why
Yeah.
would they want one that just looks like it's been through a meat grinder? And we're like,
Right.
don't worry about that.
Yeah. We'll sell it.
We'll
once it's
sell it.
here.
Yeah, we're going to sell it. And so ultimately, I think it was around 2003, we got in touch with John Cruz because the sales folks at Fender were like, just talk to a master builder. He's going to do these Stevie Rays. Let's see
Right.
what we can figure out.
So at this point, the Master Built program was already fully in effect and in
It
place.
was, yes, absolutely. And I think back then, I think there were some folks who had already been purchasing team-built guitars, and they knew they wanted that, one guy, one build mentality. They wanted to level up and get a master-built instrument. I think folks knew that, Todd was building guitars for Eric Clapton, so
Jeff Beck. Right.
So if you wanted a Clapton and you had Todd do it, you knew it was the same guitar that Clapton or Beck were getting
Right.
at the time. And there were certainly a few things off menu that you couldn't do team built. You want your name inlaid on the guitar,
Right.
or you want something
You want
crazier.
80% of the paint off of it.
Yeah. And so that was really the starting point of runs for us. And so we spoke with John. He immediately understood what I was trying to do. And he said, give me some time. It's going to take me a while to figure this out. And I think, they knew that when they had something to copy, that it was a little bit easier to pull off. They
Right.
can look at a guitar that's already aged a specific way and, copy every little ding and scratch and bit of wear on there. And,
Right.
and also I think he knew that from doing the Stevie Ray Vaughan run that he was going to be able to offer us something that met the
compelling,
mark, that was
right.
compelling,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I think we must have waited a year or two, which back then was like insanity.
Right.
Right? Because
Yeah.
usually it's like
You're
90
it's gonna
days
take
and
a
it shows
year
up.
and a half,
Yeah.
How times change.
And so we stayed in touch, and he came up with his own wear pattern, and the first one showed up, and
Right.
you could tell that he really did it all by hand.
Yeah.
He spent a lot of time getting it right. I remember he called us and was even a bit nervous before he sent it, like, it's my first one, just,
Bear with me, yeah.
Yeah, let's make
was it
sure.
one guitar was the
Just
initial
one.
delivery?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So we had to have some sort of prototype, something, and we went with a Sunburst 60 Strat, and it looked incredible, and it blew our minds,
Right.
and we didn't even post it for sale. We were like, we can't tell anyone we have this right now. And I think the next step, once the first one came in, was
Diversify.
I want a Nocaster, I want a 56 Strat, I want
Right.
a 59 Strat, I want a 62 Strat,
Right. All
ash
the
body
greatest
blonde,
hits.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we just started basically loading him up, Sonic Blues, Surf Green, just color combinations, and just we wanted to make sure that out of the gate it was all types of model years, all types of colors.
Right.
And something that looked like it was a Stevie Ray or a Rory, but it wasn't. It was yours. It was for you. It was something that you could take out, beat the crap out of,
Not worry about.
not worry about.
Right.
It wasn't a vintage guitar.
Yeah.
It was just a road warrior, but brand new. All the electronics worked. The frets
Right.
were perfect.
Yep.
Everything.
That's a good segue because I was going to ask if you imparted some of those more modern, like radius, fret size, 5-way switch right out of the gate, where you just like, we want it with the modern playability, but the look of
That's
beat-up
exactly
guitar.
it. Yep, that was the vibe back then. Yeah, so same thing, 9.5 radius, big frets, 5-way switches. We might do different pickups and different models.
Neck
I remember
shapes,
everyone
maybe.
was really into the hotter like 60s pickups back
right,
then. So
yeah.
we'd even change like give me a 50s style guitar, but let's do the hotter 60s pickups in
Right.
them.
Was that Abigail Ybarra that was winding at that time?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, so I know that her pickups became very sought after in the subsequent years. And at what point did you start to take this concept and feed it to other builders within the Masterbuilt program? Because was it just John initially, or were you kind of out of the gate like, okay, we'll give some to maybe Jason Smith or Todd Krause or something along those lines?
Sure. I think it was just John initially. And you got to remember, again, back then you really just had Relic. You had, checking, a few dings, a little forearm wear, as I mentioned. And what we wanted to do was to go extreme, as extreme as possible, the ultimate Relic that you could make, right? And there was really only one guy at the time that everyone felt comfortable giving that to, which was John.
Right.
And I think shortly thereafter, once that guitar came out and immediately started selling, I think a lot of folks noticed that was now possible. You know what I mean? Like, there weren't even other companies doing Relics back then. It was just Fender. And so nowadays, when you see, we've got it here. I mean, this is just a standard team built offering with all the paint removed. And that was born from that simple idea, which, again, they were telling us, who wants this? who wants a guitar that's destroyed? We're like, don't worry, we're gonna sell it. It's okay. But shortly thereafter, I think on John's recommendation, we brought Jason Smith into the fold. He was like, Jason's doing some really interesting stuff with aging. And so Jason was sort of the second guy we brought in. I believe that, back then we leaned more on Todd for Claptons and that type
artist
of stuff.
Model guitars,
artist model stuff. And I think we tried to figure out which master builder wanted to do which types of things, and since then we've certainly had a number of folks make the ultimate Relic for us. I
Dale
think
Wilson being one of the highlights, as well as Vincent Van Trite recently.
Exactly,
doing a really stellar job with those guitars.
Absolutely, and I think you have to give credit where credit's due. I think a guy like John put the time in to figure out how to do this the right way, and I think Jason was already leaning in that direction. So when we gave him some, his came in looking a bit different from John's, and then you started to realize, like, oh, each of these builders has their own style of aging. They have their own, like, sort of different ways they like to achieve it. I remember we got some heavy Relic stuff from Dennis, and it always had this, like, cool behind the bridge, like a line that came up, and he said he was just looking for ways to do something different, and he took his drill and just sort of like ran it across the top, and it was a cool look. But that was sort of his signature thing. So you can find like a 2005 Dennis guitar that has that like drill line behind the bridge, and it was just something he was into.
It's funny, the lore with the aging too, because I know in the early days of the Relic, supposedly John Page, when he was the manager of the custom shop, each Relic they would hold at the door of his office, and from his desk chair he would throw his keys across the office at the guitar. So it's kind of in that vein a little bit.
Exactly, And I think they had, once they knew we were serious, we were buying a lot of these guitars, they started creating like a mask, I think, that allowed them to sort of get there faster, so they could sort of tape off where they knew they wanted the major wear spots, spray the instrument, remove that mask to expose the wood, and then go in by hand and really,
make it look
finish
worn,
it up. But
those
first few batches we got in were hand done. I think he was getting new old stock guitars, and they were literally just going at him for days.
Sorry, John.
There was actually a moment years later where he was like, I love the ultimate Relic, like, keep ordering them, but for the love of God, can we build something else too? Like, it's a lot of work. But I think, we talked about Dale and Vince, and those guys sort of came a little bit later. But I think they took that aging to new heights. I think they found their own ways to make it, I don't know, more economical or more affordable or more of a time savings to be able to age those things.
And also looking better and better as the years have gone on, for sure.
Absolutely, And so, I think that not to toot our own horn too much, but go back and take a look at a 2002 or 2003 Fender Relic.
Yep.
And think about, that we were doing the ultimate Relic then, and then you fast forward to now and the way that things look. I really think that was the sort of the starting point for us with Fender, pushing this thing they were doing in a new direction.
Right, that then became kind of the industry standard to a certain extent.
It really has, yeah. And now you see it across tons of brands. There's all kinds of people doing heavy Relic guitars. And it's just going back and chasing that original vintage thing that Fender was already doing, right? We had, I think the next one that comes to mind is the NoNeck Stratocaster.
Yeah, that's another really big one.
And that's almost the dumbest idea of them all, which was Fender started with a Telecaster, right? A broadcaster, which became the Nocaster when they cut the label off.
Yep.
So Fender was already offering the Nocaster at that time.
On the price list from the custom shop.
And that was a really popular guitar, especially because of the neck profile. It wasn't just because it was a 50s guitar. It was that big, round, fat Nocaster neck on that instrument that people loved. And the Strat didn't come out until 1954, and that had a much different neck than the Nocaster. And so we just thought, why don't you put the neck from the Nocaster that never existed on a Strat on a Strat?
Right.
Nocaster neck, no neck. It was really that simple. People loved that neck so much. We were like, we got to just stick it on a Strat. And so we actually ran that on a 1960 slab board guitar.
So you got the rosewood, the hotter pickups,
reverse wound, reverse polarity, 5-way switch, flatter radius, bigger frets, all that stuff. And then we ran, maple board versions as well, a la the Nocaster.
50s style, 54, 57s, things like that.
Exactly, yeah. And so it was really just that neck shape that never existed on a Strat. So I think that was, you look at the Ultimate Relic, and that was about taking aging to its extreme and trying to make the most ultimate version possible. But then the NoNeck was much more that sort of initial commingling of specs, as it were, because again,
from historical models,
because back then, again, everyone was sort of chasing vintage accuracy, and we were like, well,
down to the screw,
and we were like, well, this was cool from this year, and this was cool from this year, so just cross-pollinate, right? And so for 20 years we've been running,
I was gonna
NoNecks,
say,
and they just continue to move. It's still that neck that just you couldn't really get on any other.
It really
Strat.
fits the playing style of that instrument too, the tone. I feel like it helps give it a lot more sustained kind of beef, and just like the way that folks play a Strat with the thumb over the bass side and things like that. It really just fits that model so well.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, we've even accidentally gotten some ZF Strats with the Nocaster neck on there. So it's the ZF Strat we should talk about as well. I think that was one of our other earlier, but probably more prominent runs that folks have seen on our website.
For sure, or in the used market.
Yeah. And again, back in the day, nobody was really trying to put a Floyd Rose on a Fender guitar. Not that it hadn't been done, but I think that, in the 80s, you saw a lot of folks retrofitting them. You had Charvel and Jackson sort of owning that market, for a long time.
Factory equipped,
And, we were starting to find some success with Charvel. And of course, our brains go back to, the whole idea of a Charvel is a Stratocaster that you've sort of turned into a Floyd Rose shredder guitar, and back in the day, you could order a Floyd Rose on a Strat if you really wanted to
through a master builder.
But that was the key. It had to be master built.
That's unfortunate.
And it was unfortunate, just for a bridge change, right? And while we understood, that for their production capacity and everything else, that they really wanted a master builder to ensure it was built correctly. We felt like our customer at the team built price point was going to be very excited by that. We already knew that the Charvel thing had heated up. Clearly, folks like Jackson had been around for a long time. So we went to Fender and said, hey, we want to buy a bunch, make this happen.
Yeah.
And so we basically got them to allow us to order, I forget if it was a dozen or 24. It was some insane number of Strats and Teles with Floyd Roses on them.
Right.
We had to make it worth their while to tool up to be able to do it.
Must have seemed crazy at the time, too. 24 Fender Custom Shop
yeah,
guitars.
we'd buy a guitar and pat ourselves on the back back then. But I just remember, you know, when all the spec sheets started coming in, they started calling them the Zoo Floyd guitars. And so ZF, it really, that's where the name came from. Yeah, Zoo Floyd, right? Because they had to name it something. And so we tried to run the gamut with that as well, 50s and 60s style guitars. We did a lot of compound radiuses. We actually did 9.5 to 12-inch radiuses. We wanted to make sure that, you know, as the player got up the neck, we know they're shredding on these, that they had that flatter radius, like
Big
you
bends,
might find, big
like
bends, big frets, humbuckers at the bridge.
Right.
I think we ran a lot with the S1 switch, which was hot back then. So you could coil tap the humbucker.
Right.
Right. So you could still get your, you know, the 3 single coil setting, but also have that shreddery humbucker.
The
Floyd
go button.
Rose.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think one of the other things that was important to us then was to make sure that we offered a Telecaster.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
And the idea behind the Tele was, there's a lot of folks then ordering a humbucker Tele, right? So traditional single coil at the bridge, but a humbucker at the neck.
Right, kind of the Keith Richards style, those guys, yeah.
And so, you know, I think the other thing we were noticing then was, you know, you had a lot of country players who wanted the Tele twang thing, but then we're also going to take kind of a nice, like, searing lead. There's a lot of those country folks who are, you know, closeted Kiss fans and Eddie Van Halen fans. And sort of wanted to build something that allowed them to unleash that in their playing.
But still have that Telecaster bridge pickup.
Yeah, so you can get all your Tele licks out of the bridge pickup. You can go to the neck. You can take a nice warm lead, and you've got the Floyd Rose there if that's your thing. And admittedly, the Strat is still the most popular one with the Floyd. But I think the folks who have gotten the Tele have really gotten in. So we've sold some of those to some major players.
Right, high profile.
Yeah, and I think we might have mentioned earlier in the video, but, you know, Adam Levine got a ZF Strat from us and showed up at the Super Bowl with it, which was crazy. I think he also did the Howard Stern birthday bash with that guitar, which is really cool.
One of those moments where we're all just like texting each other, watching the Super Bowl, like, it's a ZF guitar on stage, you know?
I actually forgot, I got to rewind a little bit back to the Ultimate Relic. So those had started coming in, and we were starting to get some traction. We'd only sold a handful of them, and I remember coming to work one day, and Tommy, the owner, just blasts through the door in the morning, and he was like, "John Mayer, he's got an Ultimate Relic." We're like, "What? Where did he get it?" And so I want to say it was like Oprah or something crazy that he showed up with a black Ultimate Relic.
Right.
So, of course, the first thing we do is call John Cruz, because we're like, we didn't sell that to him. What happened? And he's like, you know, it's John. Like, you know, he wanted one.
He gets what he wants.
And that guitar then became the Black One run. And so if you take a close look, you'll see the template that we had with John for the Ultimate Relic was a real similar aging pattern to the Black One. I think maybe we all had similar ideas back then. I'm not necessarily going to say John didn't have a similar concept for himself, or saw ours and ordered that one, but
also legendarily big fan of, you know,
SRV.
Mr.
And so I think a lot of us had similar thoughts at the same time back then, and it was all about, you know, just trying to start manufacturing these runs in a way that we could set ourselves apart from what everyone else was doing, and continue to cross-pollinate. Majority of what we were getting was phone calls and emails, and so I think those folks sort of already understood, like, maybe the Ultimate Relic's not for me.
Right.
But I want to go this direction.
Right.
I see what's possible because the Music Zoo is doing things outside of the box.
Right.
And so I think
bringing those instruments to market.
Right. I think even though we wanted to sell the ones on hand, we also understood that that was an opportunity for you, the customer, even today, just as it was back then, to get inspiration for your build from
Right.
what we were doing. So I think it was sort of twofold back then. I'm sure throughout this entire time, and I think Tommy had talked earlier about seeing that original Relic at NAMM, and it was very polarizing. So I'm sure there was people who
Right.
hated the Ultimate Relic.
Yeah, but maybe they didn't have an outlet like on some of our social media posts to hate on it so
That's
publicly.
it. Yeah, I think there was less hate opportunity back then. But it is what it is. I think that this is supposed to be fun. I think that when you idolize somebody like Stevie Ray and you see his guitar, there's a reason that they went and copied it and built it. And our idea was give them something that's theirs, right? And then also, if you find inspiration to quote out your own spec that's uniquely for you, then great. I think
Right.
that's job done as well.
So another really cool guitar that I was very fond of when I first started working here was kind of like a natural progression from the Ultimate Relic, and that was the color over paisley guitar, where it was an Olympic white, I think might have been the first one that I saw, with then all the Relic wear away to expose a paisley finish underneath that. It was on a Strat body, but I think we had run those in a couple of different formats. So could you speak to how that started and how it went?
Yeah, definitely. I think, there have been a few moments in time where you'll find a Fender guitar historically,
Iconic, right.
where it's like, they had done paisley guitars, but you'd also find a guitar that was sunburst with white on top. And so maybe
Right.
they got an order for a white one and they literally
sprayed
just
it.
sprayed over a sunburst body. And as that wore, it exposed the sunburst. And they will do that here. And so we had a sales member here who said, I've got a great idea. Let's do a solid color on top of a paisley. And we're like, you're nuts, right? Like, the same thing with the Ultimate Relic. Like, who's gonna want that?
Yeah.
But then we thought about it and we're like, well, if he wants it, somebody else must like that too. And
Right.
so, same thing, to your point. It was essentially the Ultimate Relic wear pattern,
Right.
but it wasn't wear it down to the wood. It was wear the top color off and expose the paisley underneath. And they ran those for us, and you're right, we sold a ton of them.
Right.
And then we show up at NAMM one year, and they're like, sorry, it's just too cool. We have to take this away from you.
Yep.
And you might remember going to that NAMM show, and there was color over paisley everywhere.
Strats,
And
Teles, over
yeah,
blue
our
flower.
colleague from our sales team was there, and he's like, I told you so. And we're like, you did. But yeah, that was another one that came from us. And there's been so many runs
Yeah.
that we've done. A lot of them are still in the mix. Another one that comes to mind was our Knot Rod guitar.
Right.
Again, historical precedent. You had in the early days, Leo Fender saying, my necks are so secure, you don't
Right.
even need a truss rod. And of course,
Right.
they all came with truss rods, but there's sort of an infamous photo of one of his employees standing on a neck to prove
Right.
that it doesn't need a truss rod. And so we wanted to try to recapture that. So we had Mark Kendrick build us a run of knot rod Strats, because there's no truss rod. There's not a rod in it.
Right. With that no neck profile.
The no neck profile. So yeah, he had to really hand carve those necks over time, because he wanted to make sure they were stable. He wanted to carve them, let them rest, carve them some more.
Right.
And I think we even recreated the photo of Mark standing on the neck, and I think Tommy and Dennis were holding him on it. It was pretty funny. And that neck actually got used on a guitar.
Right.
Right? And so
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of those out in the wild from years ago.
That's another thing I feel like you also will see for NAMM Limiteds, where they'll reissue 1950 and 1951. And they usually do them, I think, on like Esquires or double Esquires, and there's no truss rod in them. So
Right,
it's another
yeah.
thing you're seeing to this day.
Another historical precedent, yeah.
Yeah.
So, just thinking, there's so many runs over time. I should probably just rip through a bunch of them. We did a guitar called the Hard Top, which was a rear-loaded Strat essentially. So
No pick guard.
no pick guard. They route the back instead of the top. So instead of laying the pick guard in the top, you're putting all your controls through the back of the instrument. I think we did those with flame tops even.
Yep,
and
double humbucker.
double
all of them.
humbucker, yeah. And not to invoke the word Charvel, but I think we were chasing the hot rod Strat even more with that run. We did a run called the Gent Master. So it's a Jazz Master with humbuckers and no tremolo and a super flat radius.
We did those with like EMGs, I think, right?
Yeah,
Bare knuckle pickups.
We're
like
chasing
super hot.
the younger crowd who loves Jazz Masters, but we're also chasing the young metal guys who played gent music. So we called
Right.
it the Gent Master. I remember that one was, I was like, hey, can you do this team built and this team built and this team built? And they said yes to like 10 different ideas. But then when I put all 10 on the guitar, they were like, whoa, hold on. And it had to become master build at that point. I think Dennis was running those for us. There was a moment in time where Fender was starting to do custom shop acoustics. So they had the Guild Ovation factories in Connecticut.
Right.
So we went up there and we ran custom shop acoustics. I had them build me an ash body acoustic guitar with a plain maple neck and a Tele headstock. It's in white blonde with a black guard on it. It was a Telecaster, but an acoustic guitar
Yep.
with an ash body. And so we were doing stuff like that. That
If you have
program.
that, we want it back.
I know. I don't know where that one ended up. That run ceased because they really sort of stopped doing
Right.
acoustic guitars. I think we spoke earlier in the video. We were the first ones to do fully roasted guitars, roasted necks, roasted bodies. That was our exclusive run for a while until it became too good to not allow to all the other dealers. We've taken the Antigua finish and we've run different colorways of Antigua.
Right, instead of just that silver.
Right, so the guard and the body.
headstock.
Yeah, and the headstock in blue and Fiesta Red
Yep.
and just all different variations, but with that same Antigua vibe.
And that was an idea lofted to us from our Fender specialty rep, who for a long time was our Fender rep, Mr. Dave
right.
Waters,
Yeah.
a legend in this industry.
That's right, Diamond Dave. Yeah, I had them do weathered guitars for us. They started doing reclaimed wood at a certain
Right.
point, and they love
Sandblasting
yes,
too, right?
They love to take weathered reclaimed wood and run it through a thickness planer and take all of that like weathering and grime and just make it nice and brand new looking. And it's like, what are you doing? Time out here. Like reclaimed wood, cut it into the shape of a Telecaster and just leave it alone.
Yeah.
Like, show me that aging. Leave the nail holes, all the weather marks.
Yep.
So that was something that we were really pioneering with them. And I think you've seen them do some of that stuff. I think you already did a run of, was it the Rose Bowl seat guitars?
Yeah, it was the Rose Bowl seat, the El Macambo run they've done.
yeah.
They had a bunch of redwood from Civilian Conservation Corps constructions from the 30s when they were able to, like harvest that material and use it.
Exactly, yeah. And so we love the idea that they're reclaiming wood, that you've got this really old, dried out wood
Yep.
that was one thing that's now an instrument, but also like, don't make it all shiny and new.
Don't
Just
paint it.
like, please help us out here. We did tons of exotic wood runs. I remember getting a Claro walnut top,
Yep.
Koa body Strat from John Cruz that
Yep.
was phenomenal.
You have that one too.
Yeah, that's
We want
another
that
one.
back.
Yeah, we want back. So a lot of exotic woods. It's just, call Fender and say, hey, what else do you have? I know
Yes.
you've got ash. I know you've got alder, right? And you go
Right.
and you visit them and you walk across the parking lot to their other warehouse.
Yeah.
And there's just a pallet of like spalted maple there. And it's like, when were you going to tell anyone you had this? So spalted maple Teles, Buckeye Burl Teles. I mean, all of that stuff that I think you see a lot of nowadays, we were running
Even stuff
over
as
the
simple
years.
as mahogany,
Yeah,
Just
it's
doing
true.
mahogany body Strats and Teles. Some of the ZF guitars had those as well. Gary Blankenberg, who works here with us, also had that great idea. He had an image of a prototype, I think it was a Duosonic, that Fender had ran in the mid-'60s and sprayed with a crimson sort of Gibson chasing cherry color. So then we
that's right.
ran a few Telecasters and Strats in mahogany with that finish. And now that's part of the American Vintage 2 line. I'd like to think that potentially that's where some of that
Yeah.
inspiration came from. You know?
Indeed. Trying to think what else. The International Series guitars, we didn't create those, but we brought them back. We've been running.
Right, 69 Strats.
Yep, 69 Strats with the black pickup covers and knobs on a white pick guard, but it's like Maui blue and it's not graffiti yellow.
No, is it
Monaco?
Monaco,
Yeah.
yes, right.
I should know.
Yeah.
But
Definitely the classic black finish as well.
So we remember seeing those back in the day, but we started running them in Custom Shop 15 years ago. I've got a list down here on the floor. I'm trying to think what else. We've done racing liveries, the golf livery.
Yep.
So there's a bunch of those floating around as well. A couple other big ones, the 67 Tele, the set neck Tele.
Yep.
That's been a really huge run. I think you kind of know quite a bit about that one, right?
Yeah, and that was another one that was begat from the same salesperson that had the idea for the color over paisley, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And the idea was to do a Telecaster with a set neck. Obviously, traditionally, it's a bolt-on neck. Mahogany as well, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Went with an ebony fingerboard on it, block inlays, gold hardware, a stop tailpiece instead of stringing through the body, dual gold humbuckers. Did it have 4 controls, or was it a normal Telecaster control
I think it did
plate?
have 4
I
controls,
want to say it had 4 controls,
multiply binding on the top
body,
and back
yeah.
of the body. So basically, if you took a Les Paul Custom and you set it next to the set neck Tele,
Yeah.
there's going to
Very
be a
similar.
lot of
Yeah.
cross-pollination there.
Between
and,
those, yeah.
and that was the idea. Let's make a Les Paul Custom into a Telecaster.
Classic 50s style
Yeah,
guitars,
and
you
we
know?
did classic white and black and silver burst,
And Yuri was running those for a while.
he
And
was.
then I believe Kyle McMillan had done a batch for us. And
Right.
currently we have a batch in the works with Austin McNutt, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right, yeah. Then I think Kyle had also worked with you on one of your latest ideas, the Hacksaw Relic.
Yeah, the Hacksaw Relic, the first one that we had gotten in was from Kyle. And the inspiration for that was from a trip that we had taken together to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was the Play It Loud exhibit, if I'm
right.
not mistaken, right? And they had guitars from Jimmy Page and Dwayne Allman, and Stevie Ray's guitar was there, a ton of guitars that Eddie had owned and played, amps. It was all sorts of gear. And obviously seeing the SRV Strat in person was really inspiring, and Dwayne's SG that was super worn. The instrument that caught my eye was Kim Gordon's Ovation bass from Sonic Youth, legendary downtown New York City band. And it had just a ton of parts that weren't necessarily for guitar, hardware store parts. It was beat to hell, ton of wear on it. Almost everything was changed, and it kind of got some forward momentum going as far as like the thought process behind the Ultimate Relic guitars. Like, okay, folks had taken guitars and really played them, but they were mainly sort of factory set up instruments, right?
Sure.
So
Like they were still all the correct parts,
Parts.
just heavily played.
Yeah.
So you wanted to take it where she had, which was like,
heavy modifications.
yeah, I've messed with this, and there's all these different iterations over the years,
Yep.
right? But you wanted Fender to essentially get
Do
you
it.
there out of the gate,
Of course, yeah. And a lot of the, just having access to the vintage guitars over the years and the used guitar market, doing research, you see a lot of those instruments out there where it's like 51 Tele, but somebody routed it for 3 humbuckers or whatever kind of craziness they were doing in the 70s. So we approached Fender, and it was a similar situation where they were like, are you really sure about this? Is somebody going to want a Stratocaster bridge on a Telecaster body and make it look like it's not supposed to be there? And, they acquiesced, and we ran a few of those guitars with Kyle. We've run a few of them with Jason Smith, who's done a really incredible job. Each of the master builders, I believe, currently has 1 or 2 sort of iterations in the pipeline for those style of guitars, and that's one of our latest runs, I think, up to this point, yeah.
And I think those are really neat because, like you said, you might run a Hacksaw Relic that has, a Tele bridge pickup and then 2 humbucker routes in the middle.
Right.
And you can see where, the guitar was worn when it had a pick guard, but now the pick guard's gone, and you see the silhouette, and it's not aged much under there.
Yeah.
But I think that also allows, the customer, if they buy one of those, to feel free to tinker with it. We're sort of
course.
like allowing folks to head down a path where it's like we've already gone and put a different bridge and different routes in it for you. You don't have
woodworking is done.
you don't have to feel so precious about it. You can really tinker with it, create your own configurations.
Of course, yeah.
And it it catches the vibe. It looks like it's been through years of modifications.
Yep, and the master builders are really good at doing that stuff for a number of reasons. A lot of them have been exposed to vintage instruments from doing repairs and stuff like that, but like many of us, they got their start as guitar players modifying their own instruments, and I'm sure plenty of them had spent plenty of time with a Strat and a drill and a humbucker doing that kind of stuff, so I think it really kind of like hits home for a lot of those guys, and they do an incredible job with that run, so thank you to all the master builders watching this.
Indeed, yeah. So that's probably it for runs. I mean, there's got to be more that we've forgotten, and there's a whole bunch that we're not going to tell you about yet, but stay tuned.
They are on the way.
Keep an eye on the site. All of this stuff's available. We build this stuff for you, the viewer. Come to themusiczoo.com, shop, ask questions, talk to our sales team, cross-pollinate our ideas with your ideas. You know, we wanted to give you this historical sort of rundown of all these, you know, thoughts we've had and guitars we've built over the years, but this really is meant to be an inspiration to you, to shop with us, to know you're in the right place, that we can get really interesting ideas going for you that are unique to, you know, your needs and sort of your vision and your tone quest.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we know every little nook and cranny of the Fender Custom Shop as far as what's available. Our sales staff has been on staff for as long as some of these runs have been being made, so they're very knowledgeable about the processes and what's available to you.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, we really appreciate it. We've had a ball over the last 25 years building Fender Custom Shop guitars and all these great master-built guitars. We've become so close with our customers and friends and the custom shop and Fender, and we really feel like we're a destination for buying that Fender Custom Shop guitar or ordering that Fender Custom Shop guitar that you've always dreamed of. You could contact us and we'll help you through the process. It's actually relatively easy, and then you could be a rock star too. Thanks again for watching. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.